Most people don't realize how close to new opportunity they might actually be. So let's talk about how to win the future. Most people don't realize it, but you are experiencing history's highest rate of change, disruption, ambition, and opportunity. The next decade will see more change than the last 50 years, but people aren't really prepared for that level of change. Since 2000, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies are no longer here, and 40% will not be here in the next decade. But if you're a creator, there's never been a better time. You are experiencing an unprecedented window of opportunity in all categories. So my question for you is, what great ideas are so close within your grasp? It could be that you're coming up with a product, a service, or just a different way of thinking about things, but there are 6 limiters that block you from realizing your creative potential. We're going to talk about how to get over those limiters of innovation so that you can extract better thinking from yourself and your team. Collectively, these limiters result in a 93% reduction in your innovation potential, and I can prove it. So we can do this in a couple ways. Do you guys want to do a business case, or do you want to play a game? Play a game! All right, well, here we go. How many people remember this little bastard? Yeah, that's Clippy. Clippy pops up, your computer goes, and all of a sudden you get all sorts of handy advice like, "Hi, it looks like you're trying to write a passive-aggressive letter to your neighbor. Can I help?" So let's play a game with paper clips. I want to think about what you can do with a paper clip. So start shouting ideas. What can we do with a paper clip? Clip paper, boom, front row. Christmas ornament, 2. Jewelry, toothpick, 4. Unlock doors, devious, I like it, 5. Clean your fingernails, 6. The red paperclip story, 7. Fish hook, 8. Make a chain, 9. Earring, 10. Darts. Okay, so we got to about 11 ideas, but I want to show you what happens with a kindergarten kid, because 98% of kindergarten children can get to 200 ideas. Here's my little niece, Allie, in her challenge against you. I have a question for you. What can you do with a paperclip?
It can be a needle. It can be a sailboat. It can be a nail, a fireman pole, whether it's a builder that they drill.
How do you come up with so many ideas?
Think, and then you can make these stuff. But it's still more ways to do this.
Any other ways that I could be creative like you?
You think in your brain, and you close your eyes, and you think what it could be. And also you can watch documentaries to find out if that's true or not. Jeremy.
That's pretty good. Give it up for my niece, Allie. The first example of a limiter that we'll talk about is neurological shortcutting. All of us in this room over time become more intelligent. I think we'd all love to agree with that. But we also somehow lose our raw creativity. And the reason why is that in any creative problem, you might have your 200 ideas, your 200 ways to fold a paperclip. But over time, our brain starts to get better and better at neurological shortcutting to limit the load on our intellectual processing. And how we do it is we narrow down the list to ideas we've already heard before. That's a very important insight, because if we only say the things we've decided before, we'll be great at things where we need a split-second decision, like avoiding a lion or learning how to open a door. But this is actually terrible for innovation and for change. So within you, there are great ideas within your grasp, and that's what we want to walk through today, how to use methods to get there. The purpose of the patterns and megatrends you hear us talk a lot about are that they give you different lenses, different perspectives to look at your problems so that you can extract better thinking and ideally get to better stuff. Our business model at Trend Hunter then is helping you to quickly deep dive some of those concepts and ideally find your new opportunity. But I want to get back to Allie for a second, because I see someone that I am so jealous of, because there's my little niece, so cute and all. Isn't she cute? Yeah, it's adorable. But somehow, if you look at the age at which people peak, all she reminds me of is that she's now better than me at creative imagination. As an innovator, how heartbreaking is that? The only thing I can tell you is that I can run faster, lift more, and I'm better at basic math. But to walk you through stuff we can all look forward to, over time, we actually do get better at understanding emotion, seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise, and vocabulary. All things that are actually fantastic for innovation. So this you have going for you, and by the time you reach 50, you will actually have regenerated your entire brain in terms of neural regeneration. So we know we have all the potential to be more intelligent. The catch is, because we realize we've lost raw creativity, you need to use methods, tactics, and tools in order to always be extracting more innovative thought from your brain. You're much closer to new opportunity than you think, but to get there, you need to be methodical about creativity. Reset your expectations, kill your ego, throw away your first ideas, use patterns and megatrends, and deep dive your curiosities. Your workshop question here, what factors might lead your company to fail, or conversely, what might lead you to utopia? Next up, let's talk about learned behavior. Allie loves dinosaurs more than anything. They define her life. In a limited focus group of one, I asked her, would you like a princess doll or another dinosaur? And she said to me,
T-Rexes eat princess for breakfast.
T-Rexes eat princesses for breakfast. Nom, 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 nom. So Allie wants to do something in the world of dinosaurs, and I want to show you something that's a little bit heartbreaking.
Can you tell me why you're so sad, Alethea?
There's no more dinosaurs they can find.
There's no more dinosaurs to find? Because they're extinct?
No, in the parent I want to find a bone. Our bone and out of my poor bone.
Because the paleontologist found all the bones and you want to find bones? You know what, Allie?
Give her a little round of support, Melanie, Sally. It's the exact moment a little girl's heart breaks. The problem that you have in this scenario is that you need to explain that dinosaurs don't exist, or grade 12 is going to be really difficult. But every time you tell a little girl that dinosaurs don't exist, you limit her imagination. And over the course of your life, over the course of your career, you will encounter many limiters to your imagination. As the famed Bill Hayden, CSO, Chief Strategy Officer of Universal Orlando. Where's Bill? Bill makes a noise. He's right there. As Bill Hayden once said, boardrooms are full of people who built their career challenging ideas and showing you what's wrong. We fundamentally lack diversity and digital literacy at the decision-making levels. So our companies are increasing at a given pace. We believe we need to bring them up to the pace of today, but because the world's increasing at an exponential pace, there's actually a much larger disconnect between where we are and where we actually need to be. You're much closer to new opportunity than you think, but to get there, you need to be open to possibility, which means encourage play, stop knowing the answer and ask questions, assume you're incorrect, break rules, and diversify your team. How can you reword your conversations to stop limiting the potential of others? Or in the words of Allie,
Deep down, you need to find your little kid in yourself. All the little kids believe in themselves because they're little. But you, parents, do not believe in yourself. You need to find a kid in yourself, then you can believe in yourself. When you find that kid, you can do it. And go through the obstacle course to get to that kid inside your body.
round of applause for Allie. Go through the obstacle course to find that kid inside your body. Love it. Ali Beaubien. Next up, let's talk about cultural conformity. I know a lot about cultural conformity because when I was a kid, I was really cool, as you can tell. I got that hair, those glasses, and that awesome sweater. Now, you might not believe this, but I was actually a nerd. No, like seriously, I mean it. But, you know, I was a business idea nerd, which hopefully benefits you. And then I was always asking everyone for my little business ideas. But all I got to say is if you fast forward today, check out that. Hair, glasses, sweater. Who's the trend hunter now, Drake? This is 24 years ahead of its time, but this picture gets better when I add in my sister, because it was 1990 and there was hair. If you found me when I was a little kid, I'll tell you right away, I want to find a business idea. And I would go through hundreds of magazines with my dad every single week, every month, looking for business opportunity, hoping some little idea would become my own. But I reached a point that we've all encountered where the act of getting inspired has actually become overwhelming. And that's why I started feeling overwhelmed and eventually coded up Trend Hunter to make a place where people from around the world could share business ideas. And knowing that story, that it was all about the little business nerd, you can appreciate what its purpose was. But what I could never have imagined would be that there'd be 150 million people coming through this, or that we'd have the chance to be doing so much research helping companies find their next big idea. Because of that, I've learned a lot about strategy versus culture when helping these organizations. So I'm going to ask you, what's more important, culture or strategy?
Culture.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, when I wrote that book, Exploiting Chaos, it was pretty good timing because it was right before the world became chaotic. And as a result, that's why I actually started getting invited by a lot of CEOs to help them with their reinvention. So that was my big break, if you will. And it was a really neat opportunity to help them. But I wanted to share one of my absolute favorite stories from that journey on reinvention. So this is the tale of the turnaround king, Tony Hunter. He's the publisher of the Chicago Tribune. So that explains a little bit. But when you meet Tony, you realize that the Tribune means something different. And you get a much different appreciation for how he sees the Tribune as an icon, an institution that is part of the city. So imagine that you're Tony, and let's put you into his shoes.
Imagine you're me in 2008. A great career with Tribune Company, 15 years. Continuously moving up the ranks, record profits, things are going well, when all of a sudden the financial meltdown occurs. .coms come on the scene and begin to steal share. People are running from the publishing industry, and people are wondering if there will be newspapers in the future. Staring us straight in the face is bankruptcy, layoffs, and many tough decisions. And then my phone rings, offering me the top job at the Chicago Tribune.
So Tony gets offered to be CEO, which is a dream that he's always wanted to see come true, but there's a little bit of a catch. See, the catch is that they're going through a period of digital disruption. So they want him to become the CEO in order to be the fall guy. They want him to be the one that declares bankruptcy, lay off his buddies, motivate whoever's left, shrink the paper, and still, despite all of that, sell more ads. Basically knowing, though, that for Tony, he cares so much and he never gives up, this was a job that he couldn't refuse. So he took on the position of CEO. When it comes to laying off his buddies, I don't want to be the one that tells you on stage, so I'm going to humanize it a bit by just getting Tony's reaction to this task.
The first more difficult day was the day that we recognized that we'd have to right-size the company and take out anywhere between 15 and 20% of the employee base at the company. I think anytime you're a leader and you have to make those kinds of tough decisions, you really, that's a tough day because it's people. Even though the decision was right, it's still difficult because it's about people. And so that was a tough day. But I got through that by knowing I could lose all jobs or I could save quite a few. And one way to lose all jobs is to keep doing the same thing we're doing today.
So now, Tony's at a position where he still has to motivate the people who are left. It's kind of like being on the Titanic when it's half sunk, but you're a believer that you can still turn this paper around. So basically, he started throwing town halls and trying to think of everything he could do to introduce symbols of change. And this is when I first met up with him. He loved my book, so he gave it around as a manual just to have a common language for people. And he called me and let me know that he had turned different pages of the book into posters to try and motivate people and remind them it was a period of change. So I thought that was pretty cool. I went down there to meet him and then basically start thinking of how to help them. But it's not really about the posters. The concept is that you need to actually think of lots of tactical little things in order to make change happen.
So during our transformation, we really did 5 things extremely well. First and foremost, we simplified the plan and aligned the interests of our employees. Second, we spent a significant amount of time on employee engagement and communication. Third, we put the customer at the forefront of all of our decisions. Fourth, we invested resources against the new opportunities identified. And last, we forced a discussion of competing alternatives. And one good example of how that paid dividends was, instead of cutting the content in our product like everyone else was doing, we forced a discussion of what would happen if we added more content and asked people to pay more for it. And lo and behold, that plan, which was against the grain of the entire industry, ended up creating almost $10 million of incremental profit.
The end of all of this is that in a matter of just a handful of years, they went from bankruptcy to being the #1 most profitable news organization in America. So in Tony's words, the summary, if you want to photograph it when I get it down, is to inspire a culture of action, you need to simplify the plan, engage your team, put the customer first, invest in new opportunity, and force the discussion of competing alternatives. Give it up for Tony, because that's a pretty epic story. Another workshop question I like is to ask yourself, what tactics, symbols, or workshops could you implement to make change actually happen? Let's talk about the traps of success. Now, yesterday, we dove into this, and those that have seen Better and Faster, the general concept is that after 10,000 years of evolution as farmers, we are pre-wired to repeat and optimize whatever led to last year's harvest. The examples that we dove into in that other keynote included Smith Corona inventing the laptop word processor, Kodak inventing the digital camera, BlackBerry popularizing the smartphone, Blockbuster Video having 3 chances to buy Netflix, but they didn't. Britannica, who was approached by Bill Gates to put everything on a CD-ROM, but they didn't want to cannibalize their leather-bound books. And then Microsoft with Bill Gates deciding not to put Encarta online because it was such a great tool to get people to buy Windows 95. The lessons are that we repeat whatever led to last year's harvest, we farm. Now here's the surprise for you. I have a brand new example that I've never presented before, which is epic. And this one is going to drive you nuts by the end of it. So it's another game of Guess the Company. Does anyone here like winning? Yeah. All right, so any guesses on the company? Apple. I thought just Apple. It's a solid start for a guess. So this company invented the mouse. They invented the graphical user interface, the concept of email, network computers, and basically laid the foundation for the internet. IBM, Cisco, Smith Corona, Texas Instrument, IBM, and I've heard Microsoft, and Apple. Xerox, the best photocopier maker in the world. And that's a title they still have today. Here's the catch. A lot of you guessed Bill Gates. He did, in fact, have a graphic user interface in 1985. Others guessed Apple, and Steve Jobs rolled out with that in 84. But I'm going to show you an example that's going to feel painful because Xerox had a computer that will blow your mind from 1973.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You come into your office, grab a cup of coffee,
Morning, Fred.
and a Xerox machine presents your morning mail on a screen.
What's the mail this morning? This one looks interesting. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to need a couple of copies of this.
Push a button, and the words and images you see on the screen appear on paper.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Fred. Now, Fred, I think everybody on the routing list should see this.
Push another button, and the information is sent electronically to similar units around the corner or around the world. Soon, Xerox systems like this will help you manage your most precious resource, information.
When I show you these examples, they are interesting, but I don't care Smith Corona is gone because I can get my typewriter from somewhere else. But when I show you the Xerox, what should frustrate you is that if their invention had been rolled out a decade earlier, we'd be in a different place for humanity. They made thousands of the Xerox Altos, but they were too busy making photocopiers to care. They were too busy making photocopiers to even register their intellectual property for the computer. So what ends up happening is that a team of researchers so sad and frustrated about their unused potential takes Steve Jobs and Bill Gates on tours in 1979, showing them the stuff they'd been working on for a decade. In 1984, Jobs rolls out with the Mac, and in 85, Gates rolls out Windows. When you watch that, it's so painful to see, but Xerox was making too much money with the Xerox 914, most profitable single product ever launched. You're much closer to new opportunity than you think. But you need to be curious, be insatiable, and be willing to destroy whatever you've been relying on in the past. How can you reword your conversations to stop limiting the potential of others? Next up, let's talk about linear thinking. This is one of my favorite parts by far. Compared to 2000, half of the Fortune 500 companies are effectively gone. Half. Compared to now, if we fast forward 40%, another half are going to be gone within the next decade. Which is weird to think about, but it means half of the companies in this room won't exist in a decade. It's tough and it's real. And the reason why is that we're designed for linear thinking and we're not as good at exponential thinking. It means we could still do great at forecasting next year, but we tend to be terrible at forecasting 3 to 5 years out. The most powerful way to get you there is to deeply understand exactly how the intervals of change work. So tell me more, you say? If you could understand the intervals of change, you would be wiser at predicting opportunity, better at creating urgency within your teams, and more likely to convince your team that it's time for action. So what I did is I took a look at all different examples of human progress. We've got the world population, internet users, the advances in computer science, extreme poverty, that's almost gone. Basic education, that's up. Literacy, democracy, vaccinations, child mortality, CO2 emissions, that one's bad. Don't cheer for that one. And world GDP. And if you put those all together, you can start to understand what the intervals of change actually are. Here's an example. If we look at literacy, which was 20% in 1900, in about 50 years, it doubles. It gets another 20% by 1990, and then in another 10 years, it's at 80%. That's how the intervals of change work. 50, 40, 15, 10, 7 actually, and then 3. So let me walk you through this to really internalize it using my Irish grandpa Joe, my mom, and my nerdy self. So let's dive right in. There's your picture of Drake again. And I'll explain what life was like for my grandpa. He was a scientist, and I want to show you what his life was like in 1900. They would literally ride horses to school, to work. They had to read books for fun, because that's all they had. And he even lived in a tent for a while, but it wasn't like the tents you have, because they had, no inflatable mattresses, solar paneled roofs, or Wi-Fi. It was like camping, but it was terrible. But they didn't know it was terrible because it was 1900 and it's all they had. But by the end of his career, he sees the world go from books to magazines and television, from horses to automobiles and commercial air travel, and all the good stuff starts happening: fridges, stoves, clothes washers. But he was actually still resistant by that time because he'd become a 50-year-old guy, and they were the last people on the block to get that television, even though he was a scientist. So let's look at the next phase. This is now a faster period. And this is my mom from 1950 to 1990. She gets to watch the total destruction of automobile design. That's kind of sad. Hair gets worse, gets really bad. 1990, not a good time for fashion. Poor JT. They go from record players to boom boxes and Discman. Did anyone here have a Discman? Yeah. And they go from typewriter to computer, from television to Nintendo. Who's a client here? Nerd prophecy fulfilled. What's funny is there were more Nintendos in 1990 than televisions in 1950. And if that sounds like it's impossible, it's because I made it up. But when I researched it, I realized I was actually correct. So we went from 100,000 televisions to 60 million Nintendos, which is pretty epic. But the bad part of my research was when I saw this picture, because that mom is way more supportive than my mom was of my Nintendo. She made me take all of my violent Nintendo games and sell them. But I hid Contra from her, because that one was really good. And I still turned out okay. So okay that she took me to my first concert, which was MC Hammer. Too legit to quit. right? And it was such an epic concert that it actually turned into a riot. People were flipping cars, looting, and starting stuff on fire. And it ranks in Vice magazine's list of Canada's top 10 riots. But the thing is, it didn't have any of the like social liberty rights. It was just teenage misfits hyped up on Hammer. This guy! Yeah. And I'd love to show you pictures, but I don't have my Kodak camera. I didn't have my Radio Shack recorder. And instead, as the panic started to ensue, my mom wanted to get my grandpa to extract us out, but she didn't have a mobile phone because people didn't have them then because it was 1990. So instead, we had to go to a payphone, line up, and be in the middle of a riot. Does anyone want to see what a riot looks like? Okay, actual documentary footage.
You can't touch this. Touch this.
I should probably quit. I'll just keep that up too long. So this is 1950 to 1990. Let's look at the next period. We go from people not having phones to everyone having that Motorola Razr. Anybody in here have a flip phone? Yeah. Basically, the Discman gets replaced by the iPod. Car design gets better. Tesla releases its Roadster. Hair gets much better. For JT, that means shaving it off. Dubai becomes a thing. Shanghai becomes a thing. We go from Nintendo to this. Feel it. Oh yeah, this one's gonna be it. We're gonna hit. This is it. No, Mom, I'm on it. Don't make a call. My stuff's important too. I gotta download a picture today. And then we get this. Oh yeah, it's coming. It's no, damn. Okay, hang on. Okay, it's back. All right. So we have the internet, and it's amazing. We have ICQ, AOL, and MSN Messenger. Bring you back a little. You're tearing from your first loves. That's great. We had YouTube, but that didn't really have anything. It was brand new, and Facebook was still private. So basically, this is a world with no Twitter, no Uber, no Airbnb, no Instagram, no Pinterest, no Snapchat, no Tinder, no fun. Basically, you had to text message, learn to drive, stay in hotels, make friends, get hobbies, leave the house, and talk to people. It was terrible. So it's pre-social media, but this guy did start Trend Hunter. That's what it looked like in 2005. It was the era before graphic design, sorry. And in the next period, you'll see how we see the same amount of change, but in an even shorter amount of time. Now in just 10 years, Trend Hunter gets better. But also, my mom took my sister to Italy, and I only got the MC Hammer concert, so I feel a little bit left out. But this is the difference between the Vatican in 2005 and 2013. You used to have to walk down the street with all this stuff if you wanted to look cool, but now all these things were disrupted by the mobile phone alone. We go from goofy internet website use to 1.5 billion Facebook users in this one period of now just 10 years. And as a culture, we started to have a much different impact with each other, which was that we entered the era of shared experience. The next era might not be so shared because we're just going to sit with our VR headsets and have milkshakes. Welcome to the future. You would think that this amount of change has happened over much larger equal intervals, but actually this illustrates the accelerated world that we live in today. And you can assume that what you'll see in the next 5 years will match what you've seen in the last 10, and in the next 10 years, well, you'll probably match the next 50. You're much closer to new opportunity than you think, but to get around linear thinking, you need to internalize the pace of change, which means tracking the amount of change that's happened in your market, brainstorming your super future, shocking yourself into action, and preparing scenarios to disrupt before being disrupted. Next up, blindness to trends. And I'm going to be doing this presentation at the end of the day when I talk to you about the super future. Final words from Allie.
You can achieve your dreams. Go do it and make yourself happy, and I'll be happy for you.
You're much closer to new opportunity than you think. Thank you very much. Woo! If you'd like to learn more about innovation, download one of my bestsellers or the latest trend report absolutely free at jeremygutsche.com. Visit me at one of Trend Hunter's epic future festivals taking place all around the globe. We gather thousands of the world's top innovators to experience and prototype their future, or join 10 million people getting better and faster with my other innovation keynotes, all about how to get better at adapting to change, faster at finding ideas, and ultimately finding those ideas that are so close within your grasp.